So if you are young and you're playing and you're working and you're active, your body builds muscles because it knows you need the muscles to do that again tomorrow and again the next day. As you get older, the muscle mass decreases, and then as you get even older, the muscle mass starts to atrophy. If you don't do the work, those muscles just say, we don't need to be strong. Why? We're not lifting anything. We're not digging ditches. We're not climbing ladders. We're just hanging out. So why do we need to waste any precious resources building more muscle or maintaining the muscle that we have? So there's a tendency toward this atrophy. But when you look at the body, the muscles are one part of a body that has a lot of different moving parts. So when you decide to move and move hard and fast, your heart says, "Up, okay, I'm called into action. I have to start pumping faster because the brain made a decision to go to the gym and lift weights, or the brain made a decision to go out and ride a bike for 2 hours. So now the heart says, I have to pump harder to supply oxygen and energy to these muscles. The lungs, you have to breathe more deeply to take in the oxygen so that the heart can pump that. The liver has to work harder to clear the toxins, to create the glycogen to be used for glucose for the brain, or to create free fatty acids or ketones. The liver has to be called into action. The kidneys have to work harder. So all of the organs in the body need to keep up with the demands of the muscle. So when you choose to build muscle, the body is saying, all right, I didn't want to build muscle. I just want to hang out on the sofa and watch TV. But if you're going to go to the gym and do this, all right, the heart has to work harder, the lungs have to work harder, liver has to work harder, and so on. Now, what does that look like? Well, when you're 80 years old and you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom because your bladder is weak, and you trip over the cat and you fall and break your hip. Well, you break your hip probably because, first of all, you didn't have the balance and coordination from the muscular strength and development of that balance part of your repertoire. Number two, you land on your hip. Your hip it breaks because your bone density has failed, because you haven't been doing weight-bearing activity. The bones don't need, it's the same thing. The bones are going, why do I need to get strong? If we're not going to do anything hard that's going to put us in jeopardy, the bones they atrophy as well. So if you haven't done deadlifts or things like that in the gym, now the hip bone fractures easily. So now you've got a broken hip. Now you wind up in the hospital, and typically you go to a hospital with broken hip, you get pneumonia. Well, when you get pneumonia, your lungs fill with fluid, and because you haven't been deeply breathing for the last 20 or 30 years, your lungs are not strong enough to withstand either the pneumonia or the filling of fluids, or the coughing out of the sputum, the clearing of that. Your heart, which has been beating only at 10% capacity for the past 20 years because you haven't been doing the exercise to require it to stay strong. So the heart has at best now only 10% or maybe 20% of its prior capacity. So now the heart gets overwhelmed and you die of congestive heart failure, or you die of septicemia, or you die, your liver gives out, or your kidneys give out. It's the weakest organ Stephanie, people don't die of old age. They die of organ failure. And whatever that weakest link is, it all circles back to muscle mass and the requirement that when you build muscle mass, it requires every organ in the body to keep up with it. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's so well said. And like, just to add on with that broken hip, the other thing we see is, like, you've been talking about the two main things, mobility and cognition. You see a massive cognitive decline. Someone who's fractured their hip, they have some type of, the dementia that sort of sets in much earlier than it otherwise would, or even their ability to get out of the hospital. I think I read something, oh gosh, it was a couple months ago now, but something like 50% of people who go into the hospital, this is CDC data, 50% of people who go into the hospital never get out.
Yeah. That's
like they're incapacitated. Like if you're 70, like you're just, 70 and above, if you're not thinking about muscle mass, you are one fall away from dying.
Yeah.
It is very scary.
It's a brutal thing to say, and yet it's so real. If you look at the statistics, what I just described is not a unique one-off scenario. That's the cascade of what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, at least what I observe, you can sort of get away with not doing resist, even though I don't agree with it, but you can get away 20s, 30s, you can kind of get away with not doing, having a strategic plan for that. But the rate of decline in health that I have observed in women, I mean, my community is mainly women, but this applies for men and women in their 40s and 50s, and then in their 50s and 60s, it's non-linear, which I think is also important to consider, because I think that humans, we tend to think, there's a graph, there's an X and a Y axis, and then there's like a straight line or a straight line, but it's really an exponential decline.
Yep.
Sort of after 40. And for women who are going through menopause, or at least, in their 40s or in perimenopause, and then somewhere around 50, 51, 52, they enter into 12 consecutive months without a period. What their experience is like with lower muscle mass. You mentioned the liver being able to process fuel more efficiently and, detoxify the body. Like, this is also a really big deal for hot flashes. If you can't detoxify properly and you can't metabolize your estrogens in the way that you used to, you're going to have a really rough time in menopause. And then the sleep changes, the thermoregulatory changes that happen in perimenopause, the mood and the affect, all of these things can be positively influenced with regular resistance training of some kind.
I mean, it's a magic pill. If there was a panacea for people over 50, it would be lifting weights. And it's not a big, it's not a huge commitment. I mean, it's twice a week for most people. But with specific guidelines and done appropriately, you don't need to do that much to achieve incredible benefits that last a long time.